Robert Dudley was an English statesman and an intimate companion of Elizabeth I from her accession until his death. He was a suitor for the Queen's hand for many years, but who drove this relationship? Was it the jealous Queen or the devoted servant? We now look at the life and times of Robert Dudley, the 1st Earl of Leicester.
Dudley had what would be called a worrying childhood. His family suffered a downfall after they failed to prevent the accession of Mary I. Robert was condemned to death, but luckily for him was pardoned after he took part in the Battle of St Quentin under Mary's husband and co-ruler Philip.
In 1549, Robert Dudley participated in crushing Ketts Rebellion and probably first met Amy Robsart, whom he was to wed on the 4th of June 1550 in the presence of the young King Edward. She was the same age as the bridegroom and the daughter and heiress of Sir John Robsart, a gentleman farmer of Norfolk. It was a love match that would ultimately end in sorrow.
It would be on the accession of Elizabeth I that Robert suddenly found he was actually liked again, and to the point where the Queen made him a master of the horse, an important court position which allowed him to keep close attendance to the Queen. This suited Robert. He was able to do the one thing he loved, and that was become a professional horseman, something he already excelled at. Add to that, he became responsible for transporting the Queen and arranging accommodation. But the accolades came quick and fast. In October 1562, he became a Privy Councillor, and in 1587 was appointed Lord Steward of the royal household.
Let's go back in time a little. It was on the 18th of November 1558, the morning after Elizabeth's accession. Dudley witnessed the surrender of the Great Seal to her at Hatfield. He was also entrusted with organising and overseeing a large part of the Queen's coronation festivities. In April 1559, Dudley was certainly on the up and elected a Knight of the Garter. This was shortly before Philip II had been informed.
Lord Robert has come so much into favour that he does whatever he likes with affairs, and it is even said that Her Majesty visits him in his chamber, day and night. People talk of this so freely that they go so far as to say that his wife has a milady in one of her breasts and the Queen is only waiting for her to die, to marry Lord Robert. Matters have reached such a pass that it would be well to approach Lord Robert on your Majesty's behalf, and your Majesty would do well to attract and confirm him in his friendship.
Within a month of that news, the Spanish ambassador, Count de Feria, counted Robert Dudley among 3 persons who ran the country. By now, the princely rank of foreign visitors were all bidding for his goodwill as they aimed to make everyone connected to the monarch a close friend. Robert was also the official host on state occasions and found himself frequently asked to go to dinners alongside other ambassadors. Friendship and trust were proving to be a great success for Robert. He was high up in the rankings, and the people around him were certain who the main man was.
By the autumn of 1559, several foreign princes were vying for the Queen's hand. Their impatient envoys came under the impression that Elizabeth was fooling them into thinking they could be the one. However, it was also thought Elizabeth was keeping all her cards close to her chest, and that if anyone did move the lady to marriage, it would be Robert Dudley himself. Many of the nobility were undeterred by Dudley's new prominence, as they really could not put up with him being king. So much so that plans to kill the favourite were widespread, to the point that Dudley even started to wear light chain mail under his clothes as an extra layer of protection against such deeds. Rumours were rife throughout the court and across the continent that the Queen had already had children by Dudley, but these rumours never quite ended and would be with Elizabeth for the rest of her life.
Although the Queen had held high regard for Robert, it was obvious to see that she held close reins on his whereabouts and his other activities. It was in April 1559 court observers noted that Elizabeth never let Dudley from her side, but her favour did not extend to his wife. Amy Dudley lived in different parts of the country since her ancestral manor house was uninhabitable. Her husband visited her for 4 days at Easter 1559 and spent a month around London in the early summer of that year. But after that meeting, they never saw each other again.
Dudley was with the Queen at Windsor Castle and possibly planning a visit to her, but news came through that Amy had been found dead at her residence of Cumnor Place, near Oxford, on the 8th of September 1560.
There came to me bows, by whom I do understand that my wife is dead, and as he saith by a fall from a pair of stairs. Little other understanding can I have of him. The greatness and the suddenness of the misfortune doth so perplex me, until I do hear from you how the matter standeth, or how this evil should light upon me, considering what the malicious world will bruit, as I can take no rest.
Robert retired to his house at Kew to get away from court and the never-ending gossip surrounding his wife's death. His next step would be to press for an inquiry, and this happened, but at the inquest it was found that Amy Dudley had died through having an accident.
She was alone and while using some stairs had fallen, sustaining 2 head injuries and breaking her neck. Yet rumours continued and it was widely suspected that Dudley had arranged his wife's death to be able to marry the Queen. The scandal played into the hands of nobles and politicians who desperately tried to prevent Elizabeth from marrying him.
Elizabeth remained close to Dudley, and he, with her blessing and on her prompting, pursued his suit for her hand in an atmosphere of diplomatic intrigue. Yet his recent wives and his father's shadows haunted his prospects. It was as though Elizabeth wanted him, but not as a husband. His efforts were leading nowhere. So in the spring of 1561, Dudley offered to leave England to seek military adventures abroad, and once again Elizabeth would have none of that, and everything remained as it was.
In October 1562, the Queen fell ill with smallpox, and believing her life to be in danger, she asked the Privy Council to make Robert Dudley Protector of the Realm, and to give him a suitable title together with £20,000 a year. It goes without saying that there was universal relief when she recovered her health. However, Dudley was made a Privy Councillor. After the Queen's recovery, a strange twist of events took place, as Elizabeth suggested Dudley as a consort to the widowed Mary, Queen of Scots, the idea being to achieve firm amity between England and Scotland and diminish the influence of foreign powers.
But Elizabeth's preferred solution was that they should all live together at the English court, so that she would not have to forgo her favourite's company. I guess she had some method in her madness. Mary at first inquired if Elizabeth was serious, wanting above all to know what her chances of inheriting the English crown were. But Elizabeth repeatedly declared that she was prepared to acknowledge Mary as her heir only on the condition that she'd marry Robert Dudley. Dudley, though, had other ideas.
Mary's Protestant advisers were warm to the prospect of her marriage to Dudley, and so in September 1564 he was created Earl of Leicester, a move designed to make him more acceptable to Mary. But then in January 1565, Thomas Randolph, the English ambassador to Scotland, was told by the Scottish Queen that she would accept the proposal. Yet to his amazement, Dudley was not to be moved, and he refused. It was Mary who broke the silence on the affair, and she said,
"But a man of that nature I never found any, he whom I go about to make as happy as ever was any, to put him in possession of a kingdom, to lay in his naked arms a most fair lady, nothing regardeth the good that shall ensue unto him thereby, but so uncertainly dealeth that I know not where to find him."
By 1564, Dudley had realised that his chances of becoming Elizabeth's consort were now small and extremely limited. At the same time, he could not consider without great repugnance, as he said, that she may choose another husband. Although Dudley was always a prime target for other marriage prospects, Elizabeth continued to say that she would still very much like to marry him. Dudley was still seen as a serious candidate, well, at least until the mid-1560s. The next part of this entertaining fling occurred between 1565 and 78. 4 German and French princesses were mooted as brides for Leicester as a consolation for giving up Elizabeth and his resistance to her foreign marriage projects.
Dudley was in no mood to get involved with anyone except Elizabeth, and surely she would eventually agree to become his wife. To ensure Elizabeth did not get any ideas about marrying anyone, Dudley made sure that he would do everything in his power to sabotage such things. Yet Dudley formed the opinion that Elizabeth would never marry, recalling that she had always said so since she was 8 years old. But he was still hopeful. She had also assured him he would be her choice in case she changed her mind and married an Englishman.
As a male favourite to a virgin queen, Robert Dudley found himself in an unprecedented situation. His apartments at court were next to hers, and he was perceived as knowing the Queen and her nature better than any other man. To top this, his influence was matched by few. Another side of such privileges was Elizabeth's possessiveness and jealousy. His company was essential for her well-being, and for many years he was hardly allowed to leave.
On one occasion, Sir Christopher Hatton reported to Dudley while he was away for a few weeks in 1578.
This court wanteth your presence. Her Majesty is unaccompanied and, I assure you, the chambers are almost empty.
Dudley was often asked to be an unofficial consort to the Queen on state occasions, but he also assumed charge of ceremonial duties and organised many festivities. From 1587 he was to become Lord Steward, being responsible for the royal household supply with food and other commodities. He displayed a strong sense for economising and reform in the role, in which he had already long occupied before his official appointment.
Maybe though there was just one last opportunity to win over the Queen. Kenilworth Castle was the centre of Leicester's ambitions to plant himself in the region, and he substantially transformed the site's appearance with some major alterations.
He added a 15th century style gatehouse to the castle's medieval structures, as well as a formal garden and a residential wing which featured the brittle, thin walls and grids of windows that were to become the hallmark of Elizabethan architecture in later decades. His work complete, this was now his final act, once and for all, to entice Elizabeth. The Earl staged a spectacular 19-day festival in July 1575. If this didn't work, it was about finally time to move forward with his life. But what a way to go out. The event was as spectacular as anything imagined at the time. There was a Lady of the Lake, a swimming papier-mâché dolphin with a small orchestra in its belly, fireworks, masks, hunts, and popular entertainments like bear baiting. The whole scenery of landscape, artificial lake, castle, and Renaissance garden was ingeniously used for the entertainment with the aim to woo Elizabeth. For Dudley, though, it all ended in tears, and the Queen, Elizabeth, went back to London, still single.
You must think it is some marvellous cause, that forceth me thus to be cause almost of the ruin of mine own house. My brother you see long married and not like to have children, it resteth so now in myself. And yet such occasions is there, as if I should marry I am sure never to have the Queen's favour.
Dudley had a relationship with a woman called Douglas Sheffield. Although serious, he said he could never marry her. On the other hand, Dudley started to see a woman called Lettice Knollys, who was the wife of Walter Devereux, the first Earl of Essex and first cousin once removed of Queen Elizabeth on her mother's side. Dudley had flirted with her in the summer of 1565, causing an outbreak of jealousy in the Queen. It's thought the pair became lovers after her husband travelled to Ireland in 1573. Unfortunately though, he died while there, leaving the door open for the two lovebirds.
On the 21st of September 1578, Dudley secretly married Lady Essex at his country house at Wanstead, with only a handful of relatives and friends present. He did not dare to tell the Queen of his marriage, but 9 months later the truth surfaced at court. It would be Dudley's enemies who finally told Elizabeth about the situation, and this caused a furious outburst. The marriage of her favourite hurt the Queen deeply. She never accepted it, humiliating Dudley in public. In 1583 she informed ambassadors that Lettice Dudley was a she-wolf and her husband a traitor. It would cause Dudley's wife's social life to slowly ebb away, but then again Elizabeth would be as fond of him as ever.
In July 1588, as the Spanish Armada came nearer, the Earl of Leicester was appointed Lieutenant and Captain General of the Queen's armies and companies. At Tilbury on the Thames he erected a camp for the defence of London, should the Spaniards land.
The Privy Council was already considering disbanding the camp to save money, but Robert held true to his word and fought off any mutterings he considered to be nonsense. To raise morale, Dudley planned with the Queen for her to visit, and after she made her rounds through the troops, Elizabeth delivered her now famous speech to them.
I know already, for your forwardness you have deserved rewards and crowns. And we do assure you on a word of a prince, they shall be duly paid. In the meantime, my lieutenant general shall be in my stead, than whom never prince commanded a more noble or worthy subject. Not doubting but by your obedience to my general, by your concord in the camp, and your valour in the field, we shall shortly have a famous victory over these enemies of my God, of my kingdom, and of my people.
After the Armada, the Earl was seen riding in splendour through London as if he were a king, and for the last few weeks of his life he usually dined with the Queen. On the 4th of September 1588, Robert's health had not been good for some time, and on his way to Buxton in Derbyshire to take the baths, he died at Cornbury Park, near Oxford.
His death came unexpectedly, and only a week earlier he had said farewell to Elizabeth. She was deeply affected and locked herself in her apartment for a few days until Lord Burleigh had the door broken. Her nickname for Dudley had been Eyes, which was symbolised by a sign in their letters to each other. Elizabeth kept the letter he had sent her 6 days before his death in her bedside treasure box, endorsing it with his last letter on the outside. It was still there when she died 15 years later, on the 24th of March 1603. Leicester was buried as he had requested in the Beauchamp Chapel of the Collegiate Church of St Mary in Warwick on the 10th of October 1588. Countess Lettice was also buried there when she died in 1634, with the epitaph which she commissioned saying, "The best and dearest of husbands."
The story of Robert Dudley and Elizabeth has fascinated people for more than 450 years. From their first meeting, the relationship was indeed special, and the couple was certainly dependent on each other. The big question is though, were they ever actually lovers? The story has been written and retold many times and quite possibly has obscured the real truth. Elizabeth, I think, truly loved him as he did her. They spent so much time together throughout their lives, it would be folly to think that this was just a friendship. It was far more. As for being physical lovers, well, on her deathbed Elizabeth solemnly swore that although she loved him dearly, nothing unseemly had ever passed between them. Yet throughout all their trials and tribulations, Elizabeth was pretty much crazy about Robert. She once told the French ambassador, "For he is like my little dog." The love story ended at Kenilworth Castle when Elizabeth finally walked away one last time. The rain was pouring down, and it was this moment that extinguished any further hopes for Robert. Well, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. For more history videos, why not check out this one up here and then this one here, and benefit today by subscribing, and I'll see you again soon here on the History Roadshow.